welcome to Understanding the Great Resignation. I am your lead moderator, Chris Pereira. Also moderating today is Josh Chitre. He is the SVP of Engagement and co-founder of HubEngage. And we also have Tom Rich, Global Vice President of Sales. This webinar is approved for one SHRM PDC and one HRCI PDC. If you have any questions around how these are earned, or maybe you have questions about previous webinars that you've attended, you can contact me at chrisb@hubengage.com. The team here at HubEngage is always searching for the most relevant topic to bring to you that are current events, information that is relevant and has some value back to you and your teams as you perform your roles. We've had most recent topics like the future of remote work, employee engagement, employee vaccinations. You can also register for upcoming webinars and listen to our Internal Engagement podcast by accessing hubengage.com/resources. So what is the Great Resignation? Anthony Koltz, a psychologist and professor of business administration at Texas A&M University, coined the famous phrase when he predicted and said the Great Resignation is coming in an interview with Bloomberg Businessweek. The Great Resignation is also known as the Big Quit, the Great Reshuffle, and it's also been called the Great Reorg and the Great Reimagination. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, job openings and labor turnover survey, also called JOLTS, in April of 2021, we saw a record 4 million voluntary quits. And in the end of the year, November 2021, we saw a record 4.5 million voluntary quits, the highest numbers that we've seen in the last 20 years that these statistics have been gathered. In February, the number and rates of quits slowed a little, changing at 4.4 million and 2.9%, just a slight decrease over November 2021. Though I don't have the April numbers in this particular slide, those numbers were at 4.5 million and a little bit over 3% respectively. So you can see that this trend has continued well into 2022. And experts are saying that this trend is most likely something we're going to continue to see for the very near future. So before we go into the reasons or some of the drivers of what the Great Resignation are, I wanted to talk a little bit about the current labor market. So again, that JOLTS report for April came out, and we added total non-farm payroll employment by increased by 428,000 jobs in April, according to the U.S. Department of Bureau of Labor Statistics. Job growth was widespread, led by gains in leisure and hospitality, manufacturing, transportation, and warehousing. As we're all aware, those were some of the hardest industries hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts say that we replaced 95% of the jobs that we lost as a result of the pandemic. So, very good news. If we look at the statistics from the beginning of the year, those have been at above or close to 400,000. April brought in 428,000 new jobs added to the payroll. Sounds good, doesn't it? The unemployment rate was unchanged at 3.6%, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. That also remained unchanged at 5.9 million people that are unemployed. These measures are a little different from their values in February 2020. That were 3.5% and 5.7 million respectively prior to the coronavirus. So February 2020, prior to us entering into the COVID-19 pandemic, those numbers were 3.5 and 5.7 million, very close to what we're reporting for April. So again, very low unemployment rates, right? Experts are saying that these are some of the lowest unemployment rates we've seen in decades. Want to call your attention to the last bullet point called the labor force participation rate. Both the labor force participation rate at 62.2% and the employment population ratio at 60% were little changed over the month. These measures are 1.2 percentage points below their February 2020 values, and April reported 11.5 million jobs open. So I do want to talk a little bit more about the labor force participation rate. For those of you who don't know what the labor force participation rate is, the labor force participation rate is an important metric to use when analyzing employment and unemployment data, because it measures the number of people who are actively job hunting as well as those who are currently employed. It omits institutionalized people that are in prison, nursing homes, or mental hospitals, and members of the military. It includes all other people age 16 or older and compares the proportion of those who are working or seeking to work outside the home to those who are neither working nor seeking to work outside the home. Over the long term, the labor force participation rate has changed based on economic, social, and demographic trends. It rose steadily through the second half of the 20th century, peaking at 67.3% in April of 2000. Following the 2008 Great Recession, the participation rate entered several years of steep decline, stabilizing around 63% by 2013. While there are many factors to consider, a falling participation rate means more people are simply unable or unwilling to work. So this is very interesting. We're being told that we're adding jobs at record rates, 428,000 in April. We're at the lowest unemployment rate since the beginning of the pandemic. Yet the labor force participation rate has continued to drop. This actually has experts and economists concerned because it is far below 1.2 points below the pre-pandemic levels, but we also see a slight decrease in April from February. Ultimately, what this means is, and we're feeling it as employers, it's the ultimate grade, that there are less people looking for work. There are more jobs available than people willing to work for them. Okay. The other thing that's concerning about the labor force participation rate is that it does affect the GDP, the gross domestic product. There are less employees who are in the workforce. There are less employees who are generating payroll income taxes. There are less employees producing products and services. And so this does have economists concerned. And for us as employers, this is really why we're seeing a difficulty in finding talent, new talent, is because there are less people looking for work. All right. So what is driving the Great Resignation? The COVID-19 pandemic has allowed workers to rethink their careers, working conditions, and long-term goals. The coronavirus pandemic has forced Americans to reassess their relationship with work. Many experts have said that the Great Resignation has been a pinup of frustration that has shown its ugly head that turned into what we call the Great Resignation. During the start of the pandemic, as so many Americans were out of work and so much was unknown, people held on to their jobs. Those who were able to do so remotely adjusted to a new way of working. This new way of working has lasted for over 2 years and is in the start of the third year of the pandemic. Many feel remote work is the new norm. Employees are now being forced back into the office, and remote work and hybrid opportunities will continue to be in high demand. Displaced workers that were in retail, hospitality, leisure, and manufacturing, some of the hardest hit industries by the pandemic, which were shut down during the pandemic and unable to work, had time to rethink the type of work that they wanted to do. Some of the unemployed stood on the sidelines, collecting additional unemployment wages provided by the feds and stimulus money. These employees were able to pick up some additional skills or change industries. Lastly, I put long-term COVID into this particular slide. Long-term COVID has potentially affected 23 million Americans, pushing an estimated 1 million people out of work. temporarily or permanently disabled. The full magnitude of health and economic effect is unknown, but it's expected to be significant. The causes of long-term COVID are not fully understood, complicating diagnosis and treatment. The condition raises policy questions, such how best to support these individuals. So another thing that's driving the Great Resignation is employee burnout. Employees were reluctant to move during the pandemic, had taken on more work, additional responsibilities. Most of them saw no changes in pay, and they continued to do so because of the labor shortages. This has created a long period of employee dissatisfaction with job, with their manager, with their employer, and customers. CNBC reported in a recent survey by Harris Poll, the survey of 903 workers find that 50% of working Americans want to make a career change. Of the roughly 50% of the employed Americans who tend to make a career change because of the COVID-19 pandemic, 41% are seeking flexible and or remote work. 39% desire a raise or promotion, and 33% are interested in changing industries. According to a Harvard Business Review, employees between the ages of 30 and 45 years old have the greatest increase in resignation rates, with an average increase of more than 20% between 2020 and 2021. Resignations actually decreased for workers in the 20 to 25 age range, likely due to a combination of their greater financial uncertainty and the reduced demand for entry-level workers. Interestingly, the resignation rates fell among those in the 60 to 78 range group. In addition to higher workloads, longer hours because of labor shortages, it is speculated that there's a bigger demand for mid-level employees who could adjust to remote work versus new employees who would have to have access to in-person training and guidance, making those entry-level employees more risky. It's also speculated that the mid-level employees delayed transitioning due to the uncertainty caused by the pandemic and had more than a year's worth of pent-up resignations. So what is driving the Great Resignation? Remote work options and work commute. Remote work was a norm during COVID. Is it now the new norm? Well, according to a quarterly report from Ladders in January of this year, 18% of all professional jobs are now remote. Another 3 million jobs moved to being permanently remote in quarter 4 of 2021. The accelerating change to permanent remote now means that over 20 million professional jobs will not be going back to the office after COVID. According to their projections, 25% of all professional jobs in North America will be remote by the end of 2022. There have been several multi-billion-dollar companies in the news who have started to force employees back into the office. They have been met with significant pushback from employees. The pandemic proved that remote work is effective, productivity did not change, and in fact, in many cases, it was improved. We'll share more detail about concern and safety for COVID-19, but there's still a real concern for many about COVID-19 as we enter the third year of the pandemic. Regardless of where you fall in the debate, mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, this should not be a forgotten topic. And we'll discuss a little later on how this has been a leading cause of employee dissatisfaction with their employer and how they handle the safety issues regarding COVID-19. The CDC and other experts are preparing yet for another wave of infections as a result in the new subvariants of COVID-19 later this year and into the fall. So what is driving the Great Resignation? Stagnation of wages and instability. COVID-19 created great challenges for employers. Amidst total shutdowns and inability to produce goods and services, many organizations had to buckle down to weather the storm, and this meant no additional spending, including bonuses, pay raises, even pay freezes in some cases. This led to a stagnation of wages, where we saw a decrease in wages during this time. April of 2020, The unemployment rate was 14.7%. Temporary layoff accounted for 11.5% of that total rate. This is one of the largest unemployment rates since 1967. Unemployment benefits and stimulus payments helped employees weather the storm and some may even in some cases improve their financial position to consider earning a certificate or other job skills that would improve their career or help them change industries. While the outlook has greatly improved on where we came from in the spring of 2020, not all of this has been corrected. And in the minds of employees, many still have the feeling of stagnation of wages and instability. Instability in many cases is just as bad as poor culture and needs to be addressed by employers. Inflation. All of us see this today. We go to the store, things cost more at the pump. They cost more at the grocery store. For those that are also buying online, we see the price increases. The consumer price or annual inflation rate for the United States is 8.5% for the 12 months ending March 2022, the highest rate since December 1981, after rising 7.9% previously, according to the U.S. Department of Labor published data April 12th. Just like everyone else, it feels a lot worse than 8.5%. When I go to the store or I make purchases at various establishments. So here's the breakdown. Consumer prices for food increased 8.8% in March of 2022, the largest 12-month advance since May 1981. Within food, prices for food at home rose 10%, and prices for food away from home rose 6.9%. From March 2020 to March 2022, consumer prices for energy increased by 32%. Prices increased for fuel 70.1%, gasoline 48%, electricity 11%, and natural gas 22% over the same period. Last thing that I'll add here is that will affect what employees will be expecting when it comes to wages. And this is the federal interest rate. The Fed's raised an interest rate by another 0.5%, the largest rate hike in 22 years, and may follow through with some additional rate hikes in an attempt to try to slow inflation. There is speculation that there will be enough to prevent a recession. This, of course, just translates to additional cost for our employees to borrow money, to purchase car loans, and to buy mortgages. And then lastly, the war in Ukraine. This is certainly having a global effect on the economy, but we're certainly feeling it here too in the United States, and we'll continue to watch that, as that probably will contribute to further inflation as we go through that war. Talk a little bit about immigration. Don't really want to have a political discussion about immigration, but I do want to talk a little bit about the facts. One reason for this labor crunch that has largely flown beneath the radar is immigration. Immigration to the U.S. is plummeting, a shift with potentially enormous long-term implications for the job market. In the middle of the last decade, the U.S. was adding about 1 million immigrants a year. Those numbers slowed down during the Trump administration and hit a brick wall when COVID-19 erupted in 2020. This decline was a result of tougher immigration policies and reduced legal immigration by COVID-19. This also led to many immigrants being forced to return to their home countries, reducing the number of legal immigrants entering into the country from 1 million in 2016 to just a little bit over 247,000 in 2021. By some calculations, we are short well over 2 million fewer immigrants had immigration continued at pre-pandemic levels. The hardest hit industries being felt are the lower paying jobs like leisure, hospitality, food service, retail, and healthcare. Bottom line, this translates to good news for employees and bad news for employers. This translates to a tighter job market and something that's unlikely to be quickly reversed, given the ongoing pandemic and severe backlogs in the U.S. immigration system that have millions waiting for a visa or green card. There are certainly other factors that we didn't talk about today. What we wanted to do was hit you with some of the high-level reasons or the most prominent reasons that are driving the Great Resignation and driving shortages in labor. And wanted to talk a little bit about baby boomers. Baby boomers are another reason that we've seen a decrease in the available employees in the job market because they've exited the job market. They make a large segment up of our, had made a large segment of our population. And many of them have decided to retire early. As we know, the real estate market has been really hot. Many have accumulated tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity and have decided to go ahead and take the retirement plunge. And so that is considered another reason that we are seeing some of these shortages in available employees. Now, the studies that have been done, and we want to turn to the topic of what you can do to help prevent what can you do to help attract and retain talent during this time. According to a recent MIT study, to better understand the sources of the Great Resignation and help leaders respond effectively, researchers analyzed 34 million online profiles to identify U.S. workers who had left their employers for any reason, including quitting, retiring, and being laid off. Between April and September 2021, they cited that the media had focused on dissatisfaction with compensation as a leading cause of the Great Resignation, though their research found that it came in ranked 16th among all topics in the terms of predicting employee turnover. This, of course, is good news in that compensation is not always a leading factor for leaving an organization. The following chart represents a top 5 predictors of employee attrition relative to compensation. So let's take a look at the chart. And again, this is in relevance of importance compared to compensation. Employees are 10.4 times more likely to leave a toxic corporate culture than for compensation. Employees are 3.5 more times likely to leave due to job insecurity and reorganization than for compensation. 3.2 times more likely to leave for high levels of innovation. I thought this one was pretty interesting. And their research cites that there are companies like Tesla and Skylabs that are very innovative companies. And because they're innovative companies, while it drives a lot of employee pride and satisfaction, it also leads to high attrition rates. And that's generally because innovative companies have to put more effort, means working overtime, maybe working on weekends. And so it's not as sustainable as companies that are not as innovative. Failure to recognize employee performance comes in at almost 3 times more likely or more important than compensation. And then a poor response to COVID-19 accounts for almost 2 times likelihood of leaving over compensation. What can we do to help attract and retain talent during this time? In order to identify the underlying causes of turnover in your organization, it's important to quantify the scope of the problem and the impact. You can use this formula to determine the separation rate for all separation reasons, like voluntary resignations versus involuntary, layoffs versus firing, etc. When we look at this formula, the number of separations per year and the type divided by the average total number of employees. Once you've identified the scope of the problem, you can start to do additional root cause analysis by analyzing other factors like time between promotions, promotion opportunities, size of pay raises, performance, upskill and training opportunities. You can also sort this data by employee demographics like location and job functions, and this could potentially help you see problems with data analysis. Another effective method to gather survey data is by interviewing exiting employees and soliciting honest feedback for leaving. Soliciting and encouraging employees to submit an anonymous survey, an exit survey, could help you gather key data elements. You can also do a face-to-face exit interview as part of a formal exit strategy. Determine whether you have gaps in your organization and determine a plan of action. For instance, if you find that time between promotions correlates with high resignation rates, you may need to develop a solid plan for providing advancement opportunities as well as succession planning opportunities. Provide this data to senior executives and managers to help deliver effective solutions. Some of this can be easier said than done. The ability to gather and store this data could hamper or slow your abilities to make data-driven decisions. One first step could be to invest in a very user-friendly system that can collect and gather this information and have the business intelligence tools to help you analyze the data more easily and effectively. Sharing and reporting the data with all of the stakeholders should also be a very important step in your action plan. Consider using a mobile-friendly system that will allow you to distribute this information quickly, easily, and make it more accessible. Communicate with your employees. In order to effectively communicate with employees, it will require multiple approaches to make sure that you reach out to everyone. Regular meetings with frontline employees is critical. They have the current pulse. Why are employees staying? Why are they leaving? What is going well? What topics bring concern? And what are their career goals? And have we provided a path for them? This one-on-one communication is very effective. It's important that managers are trained to document and respond and share information with leadership. Provide regular town hall opportunities. Report what you're doing with as an organization. Some examples could be the response to COVID-19, updates on corporate culture, community involvement, the overall status of the company, work being done on diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are just a few examples. Maybe you take some open questions or Q&A. Some questions may require follow-up or require follow-up or voice a specific concern. Surveys and feedbacks. Stay interviews. These tools can be used to understand why employees are staying. You want to talk to your top performers. You want to talk to your longtime employees, or you want to provide mediums for them to provide feedback as to why they're top performers and why they're still there. Information that would be valuable for you and your plans as you develop these ongoing programs. Exit interviews. You could do this with one-on-one exit interviews as part of a formal process, or you can have them submit a anonymous survey and to be able to gather this information. Safety and security. Surveys on safety and security. What are employees concerned about? What makes them feel secure? And then lastly, performance and employee recognition and rewards. We go back and look at the top 5 reasons that employees are leaving their organization is a failure to recognize their performance and a lack of employee recognition. So again, trying to understand, trying to put tools in place where you're able to present that to your stakeholders so that they're being recognized accordingly. What can you do to help attract and retain talent during this time? We reported earlier that over 40% of employees are looking for flexible or remote work opportunities. Many employers are moving to full-time remote or some form of hybrid work schedules. Hybrid work schedules are a combination of 1 or more days in the office and the remaining remote. This promotes continued collaboration and flexibility, while this works for professional employees who can perform this way. Such schedules are also something that can be used. There are some issues with industries that operate on a more of an in-demand environment, but there was a recent study done on a retail chain that tried set schedules. The employees who were on set schedules had a higher job satisfaction and experienced less attrition from their counterparts that were on variable schedules. I've talked to several companies that now offer a 4-day work week. This is a combination of 4 10-hour days or a 32-hour work week. While this may not be practical for all areas, it is certainly a strategy and a benefit that can help you retain and attract talent. What can you do to help to attract and retain talent during this time? Compensation. As we continue into the tight labor market, many organizations have had to increase rates significantly to help attract new talent. I know here in my home state of Utah, the minimum wage is $7.25, and I see signs posted on the road for restaurants and restaurant chains at $14 and $15 an hour. I've seen Walmart with incoming rates at $18 and $19 an hour, well above the minimum wage. Okay, so as we have to raise rates to get talent in the door, we're also increasing gaps with our existing staff from the new staff. So pay careful attention. It's important to do salary evaluations and see how you stack up against your competition, and also how you stack up between employees that are currently working and employees coming in. This cannot be a bad thing. And honestly, the most important thing is making sure that you're taking care of your top performers. If your top performers are at risk of leaving because they are at or below the new incoming rate, this will need to be addressed. Non-top performers could be weeded out during this process. You might try performance-based pay. Performance-based pay is another way to reward employees and address attrition for being rewarded for a good job. This can be in the form of production bonuses, retention bonuses, years of service bonuses, and providing additional compensation for an outcome versus just a pay raise. There are also other ways to reward employees with non-monetary benefits. We've already mentioned set schedules, flex work, remote work, and hybrid opportunities. Make sure that you're communicating your opportunities within your own organizations. Employees should see that they have an opportunity to change jobs, change skill sets, earn more money, and see a bright future instead of looking somewhere else. So trends to look for in the future. The Great Resignation is a global phenomenon. Everything we discussed today can be applied to organizations that operate in other global markets. Data is coming in, and we're seeing the same trends already in the United Kingdom, Australia, and France. The gig economy. As we try to navigate this tight labor market, many have to or will be willing to turn to the gig economy. The gig economy is where we use freelance, short-term contract labor to fill positions. While this has primarily been in professional jobs like consulting and high-tech positions, we are seeing this in other industries. This can present some challenges for the employer, but there is also great advantages. I have worked with organizations that use 90% gig workers, and it was very effective and very successful. Unionization by employees to help close the gaps. Employee organizing. In the last few months, we have seen 2 landmark victories for employees challenging multi-billion-dollar industries and successfully organizing despite corporation opposition. It will be interesting to see if there's an ongoing trend. I'm not advocating unions. I'm just pointing out that these seem to be significant events as dissatisfied employees are responding and acting on it. There are 2 bills that have been submitted, one in California and one federally, that promote a 32-hour work week. The length of a work week has already been shortened in federal law once. It was originally set at 44 hours in 1938 when the Fair Labor Standards Act was enacted, but then it was decreased to 40 hours in 1940. Could this be shortened again? Pilot programs testing a shorter 32-hour work week are increasingly being attempted in both foreign nations, such as Spain, and famous companies such as Kickstarter. Another claim that this decreases stress, good for employees, decreases turnover, good for employers, and improves productivity because people are experiencing less fatigue, and is good both for the employer and the employee. And then lastly, 4-day work weeks. I know companies that are currently doing that today within the current regulation, and they're either doing that by having employees working 4 10-hour days or working 32 hours with the agreement that they'll work additional hours if they need to be able to deliver customer expectations and special projects. So in conclusion, this webinar was not intended to present all doom and gloom, just that there are certainly challenges for many of today's employers. It's important to look at these trends and see if they're affecting us in one way or another. Each organization is unique, and drivers can be different as a result of the labor market, our industry, geographic location, and other factors like social economics. Today, I want to coin my own phrase, the great pileup. Much like a highway pileup, we certainly have some obstacles. I think employers today have many challenges that are a direct result of COVID-19. Employees who need to find a way to balance work and life, the status of the current economy, and the obvious shortage of employees looking for work. This is a compilation of many challenges that will need to be addressed to be successful. If it's not just one factor, but a pileup of many factors. I provided a couple of pages of resources and links. You can identify those by the numbers that are in brackets in each particular slide. This will allow you to go back and read additional information regarding those topics. I thank you all very much for participating in the webinar today, and I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you.